The 80/20 Principle by Richard Koch. Picture yourself as a student at Oxford University. The air is thick with history, ancient books line the library shelves, and the pressure to perform feels crushing. Everyone tells you the same thing. Attend every lecture, read every book from cover to cover, master everything if you want any hope of succeeding. This was exactly where a young Richard Koch found himself. But then his tutor gave him a piece of advice that would flip his world upside down, advice that contradicts everything we're taught about hard work. He said, never read a book from cover to cover, except for pleasure. When you're working, find out what the book is saying much faster. Read the conclusion, then the introduction, then the conclusion again, then dip into any interesting bits. What he was really revealing was a secret that the world's most effective people seem to understand intuitively. He was saying that 80% of the value in any book can be found in just 20% of its pages. Koch took this idea and ran with it. He analyzed past exam papers and discovered that 80% of the questions could be answered brilliantly by mastering just 20% of the subjects. So while his peers were burning the midnight oil, drowning in books and notes, he focused his effort with surgical precision. And without working nearly as hard, he graduated with a top-class degree. This wasn't just a clever student trick. It was his first glimpse of a hidden law of the universe, a law so powerful it governs nearly everything in our lives, from how businesses make money, to how we build relationships, to the very source of our happiness. The book we're exploring today, The 80/20 Principle by Richard Koch, is the distillation of that powerful idea. It has sold over 700,000 copies and been translated into more than 24 languages, not because it's a business book, but because it's a life book. Koch himself used this principle to become a wildly successful entrepreneur and investor, all while, in his own words, being a, quote, lazy entrepreneur. He proved that the path to extraordinary results isn't paved with more effort, but with less. And that is my promise to you today. By the end of our time together, you will understand this secret law of imbalance that governs success and happiness. You will see the world not as a place where every effort is rewarded equally, but as a place where a few precious things matter immensely, and most things don't matter at all. And once you see it, you will have the key to achieving far more by doing far less. Our journey begins not in a boardroom or a university, but in a quiet garden in Italy over a century ago. An economist named Vilfredo Pareto was tending his peas. As he shelled the pods, he noticed something peculiar. A small number of his pea pods, a vital few, were producing the vast majority of his peas. Most of the pods were giving him very little. Being a man of numbers, this observation stuck with him. He wondered if this strange imbalance applied to other things. He turned his attention to the distribution of wealth in England, and was stunned to find the exact same pattern. Roughly 20% of the population owned 80% of the wealth. He looked at different countries and different time periods, and the pattern held true over and over again, with an almost spooky consistency. Pareto had stumbled upon a fundamental law of nature, but for decades it remained little more than an academic curiosity. An interesting idea, but what could you actually do with it? The world, for the most part, continued to believe in a different story, the story of fairness, of balance. The idea that 50% of our effort should lead to 50% of our results. That all customers are equally valuable. That all tasks on our to-do list have similar importance. That every day holds the same potential. Richard Koch calls this the, quote, 50-50 fallacy, and he argues it is one of the most deeply rooted and harmful beliefs we hold. Because the truth, as Pareto discovered in his garden, is that the universe is not balanced. It is profoundly, predictably, and systematically unbalanced. The idea lay dormant until after the Second World War, when two pioneers working in completely different fields began to unleash its power. One was a quality guru named Joseph Juran. He was invited to Japan in the 1950s, a time when Made in Japan was a label for shoddy, cheap imitations. Juran saw that most companies were trying to fix every single problem in their factories at once. It was overwhelming and ineffective. He introduced what he called the Pareto Principle. He showed the Japanese managers that a huge majority of their product defects, often around 80%, were caused by a tiny minority of production problems. The, quote, vital few. He told them, stop trying to fix everything. Focus all your energy on those 20% of causes. The results were electrifying. By focusing on the vital few, Japanese companies transformed their quality and, in doing so, transformed their entire economy into a powerhouse of excellence. The 80/20 principle was at the heart of this global quality revolution. Around the same time, another giant of industry stumbled upon the same secret. In 1963, engineers at IBM made a startling discovery. They found that their powerful mainframe computers were spending about 80% of their time executing just 20% of their operating code. The vast majority of the code was rarely used. So they made a simple but brilliant change. They rewrote the software to make that crucial 20% of code faster, more accessible, and more user-friendly. Overnight, IBM computers became dramatically more efficient than their competitors, not because they were more powerful, but because they were smarter about where they focused their power. From Japanese factories to American computers, the lesson was the same. A small number of inputs were responsible for a huge majority of the outputs. The vital few always trumped the trivial many. And as you start to look for this pattern, you begin to see it everywhere. In business, 20% of products typically generate 80% of profits. 20% of customers account for 80% of sales. In society, 20% of criminals commit 80% of the crime. 20% of drivers cause 80% of the accidents. And even in our own homes, 20% of our carpets get 80% of the wear. We wear 20% of our clothes 80% of the time. This principle is not a rigid mathematical law, where the numbers must always be 80 and 20. Sometimes it's 70-30, sometimes it's 95-5. But the core insight is always the same. The relationship between causes and results, between effort and reward, is almost never balanced. A few things matter, and most things don't. The problem is, our minds aren't built to see this. We're trapped by that 50-50 fallacy. We create long to-do lists and feel a sense of accomplishment by crossing off as many items as possible, giving equal weight to calling our most important client and to tidying our desk. We treat all emails as equally urgent. We believe that working longer hours is the only way to get more done. The 80/20 principle teaches us that this is not just inefficient, it's a recipe for a life of mediocrity, frustration, and exhaustion. True effectiveness is not about doing more things, but about doing more of the right things. So how do we find these right things? Koch introduces two powerful tools. The first is what he calls 80/20 analysis. This is the quantitative, data-driven approach used by Juran and IBM. It's about gathering the facts and measuring the imbalance. For a business, this means analyzing your sales data to find your top 20% of customers. For your personal life, it might mean tracking your time for a week to see which activities actually produce the most results. But the real magic lies in the second tool, which is far more accessible to all of us. Koch calls it 80/20 thinking. This is the intuitive, reflective practice of constantly asking yourself, what is the 20% that is leading to 80%? It's about developing a new mindset, a new lens through which to see the world. It's about pausing before you start a task and asking, is this truly one of the vital few, or is this part of the trivial many? It's about looking at your relationships and asking, who are the 20% of people who bring me 80% of my joy and support? It's about looking at your happiness and asking, what are the 20% of activities that create 80% of my happiness? This kind of thinking is unconventional. It's about looking for shortcuts, not running the full course. It's about striving for excellence in a few things, rather than good performance in many. It's about celebrating exceptional productivity, rather than trying to raise average efforts. Nowhere is this more revolutionary than in the world of business. Business leaders, Koch argues, are obsessed with growth and size, but in their pursuit of more customers and more products, they fall into the complexity trap. A simple, focused business is often wildly profitable, but as it adds more products, more services, and more types of customers, its complexity skyrockets. The overheads, the management layers, the communication problems, they all explode, and profits plummet. The company ends up with a situation where 80% of its products, the trivial many, are barely profitable or even losing money. They're kept around for the sake of offering a full range, or because they make a small contribution to overhead. But in reality, they're a massive drain on the company's energy, focus, and resources. The 80/20th solution is radical and beautiful in its simplicity. Koch says that simple is beautiful. The goal is not to manage the complexity better, but to eliminate it. He tells the story of Corning, a company that produced ceramic parts for cars. When they were struggling, they did a deep analysis and made a shocking discovery. Half of their products, 225 different items, accounted for less than 4% of their sales, and all of them were losing money. The other half of their products generated 96% of the revenue and all of the profits. The conventional wisdom would be to try to make the unprofitable products better. The 80/20th solution was to simply stop making them. They cut their product line by more than half. They turned away business. It seemed crazy, but the result was that the now simpler, smaller, more focused operation quickly restored soaring profits. Less was truly more. Koch lived this himself. He tells his own story of being in the management consulting industry. He realized that his firm and every other made about 80% of their profits from 20% of their clients. Who were these clients? They were the large, long-term clients who trusted the firm and weren't sensitive about price. The real heroes in his firm weren't the ones winning new clients. They were the ones who nurtured these vital few relationships for years. He applied the same logic to his personal investments. The conventional wisdom is to diversify, to not put all your eggs in one basket. The 80/20th wisdom, he says, is to, quote, choose a basket carefully, load all your eggs into it, and then watch it like a hawk. When he made a large investment in the company Filofax, it represented about 80% of his portfolio. His advisors were horrified, but that single focused bet multiplied in value 18 times over, making him a fortune. He had identified a vital few investment and backed it heavily. This brings us to the most profound and personal part of the 80/20th journey. This principle isn't just about making money or running a business, it's about creating a life. And the one resource we all feel we're shortest on is time. We buy time management systems. We try to cram more into our day. We race from one task to the next, and we end the week feeling exhausted and behind. Koch says this entire approach is wrong. We don't need time management. We need a time revolution. The revolutionary idea is this: we're not short of time. We're awash with it. The problem is that we waste most of it. The 80/20th principle suggests that 80% of our achievements come from just 20% of our time. And even more importantly, 80% of our happiness is experienced in just 20% of our lives. Think about that. 4/5 of our time is spent on activities of low value, producing little in the way of results or joy. If we could simply identify that precious 20% of our time and do more of it, perhaps doubling it from 1 day a week to 2, we could achieve 60% more than we do now while working a 2-day week. This is not about speeding up, it's about slowing down, it's about acting less and thinking more. It's about having the courage to identify the trivial many activities that fill our days and ruthlessly eliminate them. How do you start this revolution? You begin by identifying what Koch calls your happiness islands and your achievement islands. Take a piece of paper and think back through your life. When were the times you felt truly alive, joyful, and fulfilled? What were you doing? Who were you with? What was the context? These are your happiness islands. Now do the same for achievement. When have you produced your best work with the least amount of stress and the greatest sense of flow? What were those projects? What skills were you using? These are your achievement islands. The patterns you see will give you the blueprint for your life. The secret is not to try to become someone else. The secret is to find what is unique about you, what you're programmed to do best, and then to structure your life so you can do more of it. This same powerful logic applies to our relationships. We live in a world that encourages us to collect friends and contacts like trophies. But the 80-20th principle suggests that 80% of the value we get from our relationships, the support, the love, the joy, comes from 20% of the people we know. Our vital few. The lesson is to go for quality, not quantity. Identify those few key relationships and invest your time and emotional energy in them. Nurture them. Don't let them get crowded out by the trivial many acquaintances that demand your time but don't feed your soul. Without our key allies, Koch says, we are nothing. With them, we can transform our lives. The same focus is the key to career success. Koch lays out 10 golden rules, but they all boil down to one idea: find your niche. Don't try to be a jack of all trades. Specialize in a very small area that you enjoy, where you can become one of the best in the world. Knowledge is power, and deep, specialized knowledge in a niche you're passionate about is the fastest path to both wealth and fulfillment. Find the place where you can be what the German General von Manstein called intelligent and lazy, not stupid and lazy. Those people do no harm. Not hardworking and stupid. Those people are a menace, creating useless work for everyone. Not even hardworking and intelligent. Those people make excellent staff officers, but they get bogged down in detail. The people suited for the highest office, for true leadership and success, are the intelligent and lazy. They're lazy because they refuse to waste their time on the 80% of activities that don't matter. They're intelligent because they identify the critical 20% and apply their full, focused energy there. They achieve extraordinary results, not by working harder, but by working smarter on the right things. But as with all powerful ideas, the 80-20th principle has its critics. Some readers felt that applying this cold, hard logic to our personal lives was a mistake. One eloquent reviewer from Hong Kong brought up the ancient concept of yin and yang. He argued that life needs balance. You enjoy the 20% of yang activity, the exciting, happy moments, precisely because of the 80% of yin activity, the quiet, ordinary, even boring moments. A hamburger, he said, gets 80% of its taste from the meat, but if you remove the bread, it loses its flavor. Can you really just cut out 80% of your life? This thoughtful criticism led Koch to a deeper insight, which he shares in the updated edition of the book. He realized there are two very different dimensions to the principle. The first is the efficiency dimension. This applies to all the things in life that are a means to an end, the chores we have to do, the parts of our job we don't enjoy but that pay the bills. For these things, the 20% approach is perfect. We want to be intelligent and lazy. We want to find the shortcut, get 80% of the result with 20% of the effort, and move on. We should be ruthless corner cutters with these tasks. But there is a second, more important dimension, the life-enhancing dimension. This box contains everything that is truly important to us for its own sake. Our deepest relationships, our passions and hobbies, the creative work that makes us feel alive, our connection with nature. For these things, the 20% approach is completely wrong. For the life-enhancing parts of our lives, we need a 200% approach, or a 2000% approach. There is no limit. We should pour our time, our energy, and our very souls into these things. We don't want to read 20% of a book we love. We want to immerse ourselves in it and wish it would never end. We don't want to spend 20% of the time with our children. We want to be fully present with them. And here lies the ultimate synthesis, the resolution of the yin and yang paradox. The two dimensions aren't opposites, they're complementary. The whole point of being brutally efficient with the unimportant 80% of life is to clear the space for the vital, life-enhancing 20%. We become ruthless with our chores so that we can have endless, unhurried time for our passions. We automate the boring parts of our job so we can lose ourselves in the creative parts. We say no to the trivial many so we can say a deep, resounding yes to the vital few. The 80/20ths principle is not, in the end, a time management technique or a productivity hack. It is a philosophy for reclaiming your life. It is the radical idea that most of what we do doesn't matter, and that by accepting this we can give ourselves the freedom to focus on what does. It is about understanding that progress, success, and happiness do not come from scattered frantic effort, but from calm, confident, and laser-like focus on the few things that are truly essential. It is the secret to achieving more by caring about less. As we come to the end of our journey through the 80/20ths principle, it's worth pausing and reflecting on why this idea, born over a century ago from observations of peas and wealth, continues to resonate so deeply. I believe it's because it offers a powerful antidote to one of the most pervasive diseases of modern life, the cult of busyness. We live in a world that glorifies the hustle. We're told that success requires constant grinding, that a full calendar is a sign of importance, and that to rest is to fall behind. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor. But deep down, many of us feel a gnawing sense of dissatisfaction. We're busy, yes, but are we effective? We're productive, but are we happy? We're doing more, but are we achieving more of what truly matters? Richard Koch's work is a quiet but firm rebellion against this entire mindset. It gives us permission to stop, to breathe, and to ask a very simple but life-altering question. What is actually important here? The book is not an argument for laziness, but for a more intelligent and focused form of effort. It's a call to replace frantic, unfocused energy with calm, deliberate action. What's most powerful about the 80/20ths principle is that it's not just a theory, it's an observable fact of nature. It's a truth you can see in your own life right now if you just look. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start to notice the vital few everywhere, and you become acutely aware of the trivial many that drain your time and energy. This awareness is the first step toward freedom. The final insight about the two dimensions, efficiency and life enhancement, is, for me, the most profound. It resolves the central tension of the book. It tells us that we don't have to become cold, calculating efficiency machines in all areas of our lives. In fact, it's the opposite. We should be ruthlessly efficient with the things that don't matter, precisely so that we can be deeply, passionately, and inefficiently human with the things that do. It's about clearing the clutter to make room for the masterpiece. So how can you start applying this today in a simple, practical way? Here are 3 small actions you can take. First, conduct a simple 20% audit. For the next week, just observe your life. At the end of each day, take 2 minutes and ask yourself 2 questions. What was the one activity today that produced the most valuable result in my work or studies? And what was the one moment today that brought me the most genuine joy? Don't judge, don't change anything yet. Just notice. You're looking for the clues to your own vital few. Second, try the Just Say No challenge. Look at your schedule for the coming week. Find one small, low-value commitment. A meeting you don't really need to be in. A social obligation you're dreading. A task that someone else could and should be doing. And then, politely, respectfully, say no. Reclaim that hour and dedicate it to something you identified in your 20% audit. Feel what it's like to trade the trivial for the vital. And third, identify one vital few relationship. Think of the one person in your life who, when you spend time with them, leaves you feeling energized, supported, and more yourself. This week, make a conscious effort to invest a little extra in that relationship. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture, a phone call instead of a text, an hour of your undivided attention, a thoughtful message telling them why you appreciate them. Nurture the relationships that nurture you. These small steps begin the time revolution in your own life. They start to shift the balance from a life lived by default, reacting to the demands of the world, to a life lived by design, focused on what truly matters to you. That was our exploration of the 80/20th Principle by Richard Koch. We've journeyed through the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a travel brochure. It can show you the pictures, but it can't give you the experience of the journey. The real magic happens when you read the book for yourself. It's in those quiet moments when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is your map, designed to help you decide if this is a journey worth taking. If anything we've talked about today has sparked a curiosity in you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning a new idea. It's about adopting a new way of seeing the world that can genuinely change how you live each day. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if this journey together has brought you any value, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know that we're on the right path, and it ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep growing together.